Good evening, Jim Wright here again. And recently I had the opportunity to speak with a local farmer by the name of Eli Stansel. He operates a small farm outside the city of Boswick, Georgia, which is a small farming community about 1 hour east of Atlanta. Each October they have an annual cotton gin festival. That's how I came to know Boswick. I discovered it driving from Atlanta to Madison one day. And at this cotton gin festival, you get to see one of the few operational cotton gins left in the state of Georgia. So sit down and relax and enjoy this conversation with Eli Stansel about farming in the 21st century. What is the day in the life of a farmer, to pen a Beatles song?
Yeah, so I mean, and it's varied based on the branch of agriculture you're in and the size that you have. You look at our farm, and I work off the farm full time, and then this is something that we do on the side, but it consumes most of our free time. So the day in the life of us, you got to experience part of that today. It's hay season. We get about 3 hay cuttings a year. So I will spend the next 4 to 5 days investing in cutting my hay, drying it, getting it packaged up, and then put away. Now, of course, that tails off in the wintertime a little bit because grass doesn't grow as well. But in the summertime, it's up and big. So very different from somebody that maybe does what they call truck farming, which is actually vegetable farming.
Okay.
And so those actually tend to be from first of spring to your first of frost, as they're constantly changing from the vegetables that you go and pick up in the store.
Okay.
And so you have kind of fluctuations in labor and everything else as you need to be out there and picking the tomatoes, or now getting ready to plant broccoli for,
And keeping up with that demand
right.
that goes on.
And that's the challenge. You know, if you look at what we have, our main product that we grow is hay. And that demand can be varied based on who's looking for it. You know, people that have horses want a very specific type of hay, very weed free. That runs our input cost extremely high because you need to spray that and treat it in such a way you guarantee you have good grass growing. As opposed to if you're feeding, you know, I delivered to some dairy goat farmers last week that saw my ad on the internet, and they didn't care that it had some weeds and stuff. Goats love weeds, so we were able to market, you know, with the internet to the people that really are looking for our product.
Okay. So you're saying on your farm you would have a plot of land that would be treated for weeds, to kill the weeds, so that would go to a different customer, and then maybe another part of your land that could be going to animal feed or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's really, you start making those choices based on what you see the economy doing. You know, do I think there's going to be a demand? I'm kind of having to bet on next year.
Yep.
Do I think I'll see a lot of horse people looking for hay? And then I have to also look, because as the price of oil goes up, not only as I'm burning that diesel fuel in my tractor, most of the chemicals people spray are petroleum based.
Yeah.
And so that increases your input costs. So I may say, you know what, it's not worth the extra price of spraying that field, because I think I can make just as much with my margins being a little bit bigger, going to the goats, not having to worry about spraying.
Okay. All right. So you talked about on your farm, you're growing hay, you're growing grass that will become hay. And you kind of already mentioned what happens to it. You know, you cut it, you bale it into the big balls that you see out on the field, and then you put an ad somewhere online, and then someone buys it. What other crops are you growing at the Stansel farm?
Yeah, so at us, a couple of things that we also do here is we grow sweet corn. So if you think about those big, pretty ears of corn you see people eating at the picnics, it has a real high sugar content. We grow some of that for our own use. I think our record last year off of half an acre was 1,200 ears of sweet corn.
Wow.
And then this year, in addition to sweet corn, we also grew what's called field corn. And so if you think about cornmeal or cornbread or something like that, that's grown out of a field corn, which has a lower sugar content, and you actually let that dry on the stalk itself.
Okay.
And that can either be for human consumption, or you can actually sell it on market and it get ground up. So if you enjoy your chicken tenders from, you know, Chick-fil-A or wherever, chances are those chickens were fed field corn from a farm around here where it was grown.
Okay. Which is cool. You know, Chick-fil-A is a Georgia-based company. It makes sense that they should eat Georgia-based corn.
That's right.
You're a farmer. It's the 21st century. We live in this digital, technical age, and you think of farming, and people think, "Oh yeah, it's
back in the day, horse and buggy type deal. What does it mean? What are some positives? What are some negatives with being a farmer in this age? And maybe on a whole, the agricultural industry, what are some positives and negatives?
Okay, so there's a lot to them. If you look at kind of the size of plot that we run here, if we went back a couple of generations, this would be considered a family farm you'd make a living off of. Um, so people are very tied to the land. With technology increasing, so if people use their GPS phones to figure out where they're going, you share your location, that's all programmed into the bigger tractors now. Now, I don't splurge for that money because my property doesn't justify it. But if we look at places like, Kansas, Iowa, those farmers have every inch of their field plotted. And so they're able to get out there, hit go on a tractor, and sit back and could read a book. And the tractor will drive itself, it'll drop the appropriate amount of fertilizer, the seeds in the right place, it tells them when to harvest, what their moisture content is. So there's a lot of advantages there. The downside to that is with such a high technical shelf, it costs a lot of money to get in. I don't know what the newest iPhone goes for. It's probably, over $1,000, and that's for a little iPhone. Now you think about, you multiply that into a big cab tractor with an iTrack, you're looking at $300,000.
Yeah.
And that's just not something. So there's a shelf that makes it difficult for people to launch into. Now on a local level, why we do it, I really like being connected to the land. My family grew up farming in North Gwinnett when there was farms everywhere, and so we have a long history in that, and I really enjoy being out there. The challenge, there are times when it's going to rain.
Yep.
And I don't want it to rain. Or there's times I want it to rain and it doesn't rain. So you deal with those cycles. And you wonder, am I going to get a product out of this? Is my hay going to be quality? Is my corn going to make out?
Yep.
And that's part of how we actually feed ourselves. We're not completely sustainable here. We could be if we wanted to, but we harvest our tomatoes and put those up and make homemade tomato sauce throughout the year, and pasta sauce and everything else. So,
and that's the gamble. That's the gamble you play every season, and every farmer across the land plays that gamble every season.
That's right. And it's there's some incentives to try to get people to come into it. The USDA tries to help out with the type of crop insurance, but it doesn't necessarily cover all those costs. I could have a total failure, and if I had crop insurance, it's not going to cover even my input costs. So it is a gamble.
Okay. So as we conclude for today, what are some things you'd like to say about being a farmer? You didn't grow like you grew up. You were on the farm, but then you went to college and you did something else. And what would you say to being a farmer today?
It's really, to me, there's a great kind of visceral, that fancy word for feeling it on the inside, of being able to look at something I've done with my hands, and to know that, as markets go up and down, as things look like they may get tough or may get easy, I know that I can use my hands to do something, to grow something, to build something, and it's on a scale where I know I could feed my family if I had to. But there's a reward in that.
Yep.
To be able to sit down at the table and to say, I grew that. We grew that. We started talking about that in January. We put it in the ground in April. Here we are in the middle of summer enjoying what we put in the ground.
Yeah. And we have a garden in our house, and my wife had laid zucchini out, and that satisfaction of I planted it, I tended to it, it grew, and now we're consuming it.
Oh yeah.
There's a pride in there that, hey, I could do this.
Right.
I'd like to thank you for this time, for letting me on your farm and seeing you do what you do. What made you switch from being a farmer, or switch to being a farmer?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I grew up around it. I had a longing for it, and I enjoyed being on it. And it was an experience that I valued, and wanted to provide that for my family. Wanted to make sure that they kind of understood this is how we provide for the nation. Yeah, well, maybe a little sliver. I'm not driving a transfer truck full of goods to deliver, but I'm providing a service.
Yep.
And there's some great satisfaction in that. In my off-farm job, I worked for the railroad, which is a big key part of the transportation industry.
It sure is.
And the amount of commodities which we move that come off of farms to and from across the nation. It really, it's neat to be a part of that. Just kind of one link in that whole chain, that I'm putting something that gets transferred that may get used somewhere else, or somebody that grows something somewhere else I may end up using here.
Yeah.
So that's part of why we drove our focus here. We thought that that's a place where we wanted to be, raise our family, and to help contribute to the nation.
And that's awesome. You know, the transportation systems in Georgia are huge. It's why Georgia has such a vibrant economy. Well, one of the reasons why it
Mm-hmm.
has such a vibrant economy. These four systems work together for the good of the state. You know, you got boats that bring stuff in, they get on trucks and railroads. You know, here on the farm, you take that hay that you grew, and it goes somewhere on a truck or maybe even on a rail.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know, but because Georgia has such a great transportation system, it really affects the economy.
It sure does.
And I'd like to say once again, thank you again.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming out to the farm.
Thank you. This is Jim Wright on location in Boswick, Georgia. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.